what's most common is we get 6 or 7 of our leaders, we go away for a weekend, we think up the big thoughts, and then we get these big auditoriums full of people and we present what our direction is, and we expect everybody to salute that. Well, we just flipped that.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Force for Good. I'm Rick Gertzma. I'm the Mental Health Senior Advisor with the Miller-Dwan Foundation, and I'm thrilled today. We have a guest with us who actually I met for the first time in person today. I've met Gary in the past as we've been doing some work together with the Miller-Dwan Foundation. And so what I'd like to do is have Gary introduce himself, a little bit about your work, what's your background, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I kind of feel like you and I have been having a conversation for about a year, so it's a little odd to know that it's finally happening in person today.
Exactly.
Thank you, Zoom. What did we do before that?
And not only that, now you're on a podcast. So when you show up in town, you're automatically, that's it. You're the guest.
You have to do it. And I can't think of a better synergy than coming into a podcast called A Force for Good. Which really underlines a lot of what is my intention in my work. So I have my own consulting practice, Gary Hubbell Consulting. Couldn't come up with a better name. A little low on the creative. So I thought, well, Mom and Dad gave me this one. I'll go with that. I reside and work out of Milwaukee.
Okay.
And I've had the great good fortune, the privilege of working with numerous, often large, complex, not-for-profit organizations. And I typically get asked to do 3 things, whether the leaders who invite me to do that are conscious of it at the moment or not.
There you go.
One is to help them simplify complexity, because that's growing by leaps and bounds. Secondly is unify their teams around stated direction. And thirdly is to lean into some transformative change.
Okay.
I tend to be drawn to people that are not just trying to make incremental improvements, but are trying to make a real inflection. So I get drawn into the deep end of the pool, and that's the stuff I love.
Yeah, and I can see just by the expression on your face, you have a passion for that.
I do. I was asked when I started my company in 2006, a friend who helped me think through the launching of the business said, well, why are you doing this? And one of the things I did say to her is there's something so compelling about the deep end of the pool. When your feet can't touch the bottom and you're too far away from the rail, you better figure out how to swim, because the alternatives are not good. So it's kind of stuck with me in terms of my work.
So 2006 was when you actually started this work. And before we talk about your relationship with the Miller-Dwan Foundation, there's a word that you use, and I'm going to try to say it, simultaneity.
That's good.
Thank you. I've been practicing because I love the word, and frankly, I love words. But could you talk about that? Because I think it's an important part of not only the work that you do, but I think it might be the thing that brings you the passion that you really have for your work.
Yeah, thanks. You were paying attention at breakfast. I wish I could say that it's a word of my own creation, but it's one of the original 5 principles that undergird the body of work known as appreciative inquiry.
Okay.
And to me, simultaneity, the principle of simultaneity, is that things happen at about the same time in ways that we can't know or predict, but the convergence of those things bring about a level of possibility that wasn't there until that intersection. And there's always been something for me that's just been magical about that.
Wow.
Because so much of my work is trying to illuminate possibility.
Sure.
And simultaneity is something that I stopped trying to figure out, but rather just acknowledge when you're feeling it. So I wasn't even aware that I used that word at breakfast. So now I got to watch what I say.
Yeah, it's a fascinating word, and to me, as I think about all of the work that's happened with our HOPEX initiative, and watching things, and I use the word serendipitous, and I think they're very similar sorts of words.
I would agree.
You actually, Tracy was the first guest on the Force for Good, and then we had Dr. Brandon Court and Dr. Adam Brown, who are now our partners with PM Plus. We had Zach Williams, and what's incredible to have you in town today is you really have been a part and were a part of this whole beginning planning stage of what Tracy, when Tracy Marciniak said, I want to implode the organization and we need to start something new and transformative. You were actually a big part of that work.
Yeah, thanks. I have a great deal of gratitude that I was trusted enough to come alongside the leadership team at that time, because it was, without knowing any of the detail, it felt to all of us like this was a moment of inflection.
Mm.
And I remember in the earliest, maybe that very first meeting, when I asked Joan Oswald, one of the executive staff members, well, how would you describe this moment? And Joan made some reference to that the foundation felt like a sleepy little enterprise.
Oh.
And she was probably being a little pejorative, but what she was trying to convey, I think, was we don't feel that way anymore, and we don't want to be seen that way. So it felt like a moment of readiness for
Sure.
something to emerge.
Sure.
So it was I think for me in my work, partnering with organizational leaders, when there's that kind of intention at the front end,
Yeah.
then literally anything is possible. So that helped to frame that moment.
Sure. Sure. And so that process of what we commonly, or I would commonly refer to as strategic planning. Can you talk about that? What came together? What happened with your work? Of course, I wasn't part of the Miller-Dwan Foundation at that point, so I don't have the lived experience. So I think it would be good to sort of tell that whole narrative, that whole story of how did this whole HOPEX and senior mental health advisor and all these things come together. I think giving some context could be really helpful.
Yeah, it's probably a lot like describing to somebody how sausage is made. The process itself seems a little unnecessarily laborious.
Sure.
But the result is what matters. And what was both fun for me and interesting is that because the foundation leaders weren't embarking on planning with a known destination in mind, it
Sure.
made everything possible. So rather than starting with a set of givens, we're going to incrementally improve our service or product by X percent,
Sure.
which happens in a lot of planning undertaking. And sadly, I think when that happens, the leaders default to a set of known assumptions about the current reality,
Yep.
and then a projection of some improvement of that moving forward. That was not the case with the foundation.
Okay.
What happened, because there was just a sense of one, a strong sense of loyalty and a strong sense of honoring the historical path of the foundation,
Okay.
and at the same time recognizing that if we continue to hide our light under a bushel, then we're not going to make much impact.
Okay.
And so with that as a starting point, we just tried to use different planning tools
Okay.
to illuminate possibility. This is the point where sausage is about to be made, Rick.
Yep.
So we did a handful of things. We did an opinion survey of key stakeholders so that we could understand what they value and what they see emerging, so we could be informed by that. We also used the principles of scenario planning, where we tried to look 15 to 20 years out in the future, and we tried to imagine plausible alternative futures in as much detail as we could. Nobody can predict the future, but we could all riff a little bit, and we decided what were two key drivers of change, and when we intersected those drivers, that created 4 quadrants.
Okay.
And those became the scenarios, 4 different scenarios. An overlay to that, still with me, Rick?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm there.
An overlay to that is that we identified 6 or 8 key constituents. And so we identified those groups. And so when we were doing the scenario thinking, we were trying to take an empathetic look at those futures through the eyes of those different stakeholders. So it wasn't our projection.
Exactly. Yep.
We were having to role play those constituent groups and how that future that we saw emerging would shape their decision making. So that was a bold way for the foundation of coming out of their own unconscious projection onto the future.
Yes.
So that became pretty important. And then we got serious about the business side of it.
Okay.
And we said, for any of these, for us to try to navigate any of these futures, we're going to have to look at our own business model. And so we developed a business model canvas and set that to a financial model.
All right.
So it was a way for us to test how we would live into this future, how we would organize ourselves, who our key customer segments were, what were our channels of distribution, our communication, who would be our partners, all of those things, including what resources would be required to fuel this and what income would be generated.
Got it.
So it had to make sense at a bottom line level as well.
Yes.
And so with all of that there, I'm coming in for a landing.
Yeah, I see it.
Still with me?
Yeah.
With all of that there, then what we said is, what can be our simplest, most adaptive path forward?
Right.
Given all of the work that we've already done. And that resulted in one bold vision that led to 3 easily articulated goals that became for the foundation more of a compass than a detailed map.
Exactly.
So it gave us enough latitude to be able to be adaptive and make decisions on the fly, but have enough guidance of where we were headed that people felt clear and bolstered by the plan. And so we're halfway through the implementation of that.
And the plan that was put together, was that, it's a 5-year plan? Is that? Okay.
In this instance, it was.
Okay.
That's not automatic, but
Okay.
in this case,
Yep.
the leaders felt that because of the enormity of the transformative change that they were seeking to incubate, that a shorter planning cycle would not give it enough room to breathe.
Oh, okay.
That we were actually going to have to seed some of the bigger changes, and that would take a couple years up front.
Okay. And so in my thinking and my experience, really I think about the sort of a canned phrase of strategic planning, and that this becomes a strategic plan, a potential roadmap to where it is that we want to go or could potentially go. And my experience with strategic planning is certainly not the lived experience that I have being in a strategic plan. Um, so specific to the Miller-Dwan Foundation, what do you see as different, or what excites you about this? Because as you and I have talked, certainly, and even as you talk today, there's something that happens. Your eyes light up. You get a smile. It's like there's something serendipitous. There's simultaneity happening here. So could you talk a little bit about that with your own lens and your own experience?
Yeah, two things that I think I would point to is one, during the whole process of planning, Tracy and the team were willing to adopt what I was calling a whole systems approach.
Okay.
So systems in this case, meaning the human ecosystem in which the foundation operates. And so as we were trying to make sense of these futures, we brought constituents together for 2 full days, and we had teams. We had, I don't know, 30, 35 people.
And constituents meaning people.
They were grantees, they were
okay.
board members, the staff was involved, healthcare partners.
Okay.
So many of the existing constituencies
Sure.
that the foundation was serving.
Okay.
So rather than what is too often the case, and I get the smile because sadly it doesn't work, yet organizations keep doing it.
Okay.
You know, what's most common is we get 6 or 7 of our leaders, we go away for a weekend, we think up the big thoughts, and then we get these big auditoriums full of people and we present what our direction is, and we expect everybody to salute that. Well, we just flipped that. And we said, while we're imagining possibilities, let's bring those people in and imagine possibilities with them.
Okay.
And so the reason why I point to that is because as the plan was coming together, it always felt like it had everybody's fingerprints all around it. The leadership team didn't have to sell anything.
Right.
They were literally holding space for and honoring a collective product. Largely because of that, or at least in relation to that, this notion of being bolder, acting bigger, being bolder, adapting better, the leadership team took quite seriously and said that starts with us. We're going to have to be bolder. We're going to have to issue a bolder invitation.
Nice.
If we're going to have any impact beyond what we've been having for decades, which was perfectly fine.
Sure.
It was just felt to be artificially limited.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I kept hearing from the staff is, well, why not us? Why not us?
And that's actually a phrase that's come up in the podcast, as you probably have.
I smiled every time I heard it.
Yep, because now we say, why not? right?
Exactly.
Yes.
And so that became an animating shared principle of the executive staff.
Okay.
And so to me now, coming alongside the team episodically, it's an absolute delight because what I see is a leadership team, yourself included. I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to meet you in person now.
Thank you.
What I see is a leadership team that is elevating its game and accelerating its pace. And that's true for the foundation as well. And in fact, it's now that you've unleashed PM Plus, now that the Global Institute is coming into reality, now that your partnerships are happening on truly a global scale, you can't go back to being small. You're going to continue
Agree.
to act bigger, be bolder, and adapt faster, because one, the world needs you to do that,
Exactly.
and two, having done it this way now for just even a few short years,
Yeah.
this is the new normal. You can't go back.
Interesting. And actually, when you talk about bringing those constituents together, I was not obviously a part of it. I think about how we landed on HOPEX as our initiative, and HOPEX, of course, multiply community healing. It's actually like we started with the community and started multiplying in the planning process. Because you said how many people came together?
I think it was 30 to 35.
So there's already 30 to 35 different community members with very different community perspectives. And so it wasn't just a group of 5 or 6 people. It was let's multiply and get all sorts of people involved in this process.
Yeah, it will be no surprise to you, but one of the founding, underlying, undergirding principles of what shaped how we decided to plan is our belief that people tend to own what they co-create. And
Of
so
course.
for this plan that was designed always to live in community, Miller-Dwan was not acting on community, but with community. And so leaders lead, leaders plan in the same way that they choose to lead. So by planning in a way that was in community, it was inviting no boundary, no barrier between the foundation and community right from the planning. So when programmatic initiatives, when HOPEX rolls out, there's no surprise that it has multiple fingerprints all over it.
Sure.
Because it was born in community.
And now today, where we are today, thinking about, I love that, the fingerprints. Now the fingerprints include the New School for Social Research. The fingerprints include George Washington University. The fingerprints include the people who have our first cohort of people who have completed PM Plus training and the work that they're doing, because now we're actually implementing PM Plus in the community. And one of our helpers from the first cohort is actually finished and has reached one person and done a complete 5-session of PM Plus. So the fingerprints, the multiplication, it's just continuing. Did you imagine that this was possible? And the reason I'm asking that is because after a year and a half of being at the Miller-Dwan Foundation, I never imagined that this is where I would be sitting today. I never imagined we would be having a national impact, let alone that we would have global partners and be able to say that we are directly connected to the World Health Organization. So from your perspective, from being there at the very beginning, did you imagine?
I'd say a qualified yes. Qualified only in this way. And this was something, I can't speak for the leaders at the foundation, the planning team, Tracy, Joan, Carrie Jo, the principal architects of this. I think we talked ourselves in to possibility, but we couldn't predict it. We didn't know the path. But one of the things that became really liberating, I think, for us is that we said, we don't need the foundation to be the source for the idea. We need the foundation to hold space for, to be the soil, the fertile soil for the idea.
Right.
And so what we said is, what we need to be able to do is credibly attract a big idea. And what we would benefit from is bringing to that the expertise that would know how to tend that newly planted seed.
Sure.
And that unlocked the door. That's where we were able to, with Tracy's knowledge of community and network, to find you, and it was an immediate fit. And so, and because you've been the architect of the elevation since then, but that's what unlocked it. So we kind of knew that big possibility was there.
Sure.
We talked ourselves into, yes, maybe it's us. We could do, sorry, I'm speaking as if I'm on the inside, but I feel very much a partner.
You are. You're definitely on the inside.
And so from that point of view, the rest is details. And the details have been amazing. They've been incredible. And we couldn't see them all.
No.
But we could see the door, we could see the portal, and that was really liberating, I think, for our planning work.
And for the listening audience, the energy, and again, this happens all the time with this initiative. Sitting in a room with Gary, talking about what's happening, the bowl, the transformation, all of those pieces, it's palpable. And what's happening with the Miller-Dwan Foundation and HOPEX and this initiative, it's palpable. And I've said several times, we will transform. And we are doing that. And thank you for all of your insights, all of your work, your willingness to partner, and continue to walk alongside and be such an important part of this process. I feel just tremendous gratitude to have this conversation because you've been a part of it, and so thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Rick. If you'll permit me, one other dimension that I wanted to lay in to this is that while there's a lot of well-deserved attention on the new initiatives, PM Plus, HOPEX, that attention takes nothing away from the initiatives that have been ongoing,
Agreed.
The historic initiatives.
Nicely
and
said.
In fact, I think things like Amberwang and Solvay and the other legacy initiatives of the foundation will themselves be elevated and accelerated. In fact, I think what the foundation is doing right now is really modeling what it's like to be nimble, to think at both a local and a global level, not
Nice.
either or, but both.
Absolutely.
And there are many organizations, for-profit, not-for-profit, that can't make that switch. Miller-Dwan can, and that is pretty powerful. So it's pretty exciting time to come alongside the foundation.
Incredible. Thank you so much for taking the time. It truly has been a pleasure. And that'll wrap up this episode of The Force for Good. Please tune in, channel, social media, take a listen. Any comments, of course, we would love that. And remember, join us in being the force for good.